Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome for a second time a very senior and respected corporate leader, uh, Mr. Garry from the USA. Garry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's delighted to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me along.
Thank you. Garry is the chairman emeritus of the WD company. He's also called the culture coach, and he's an author. And all of you know I'm very partial to authors. He's an author of a book titled Any Dumbass Can Do It. So, Garry, we're going to focus our discussions around your book today, but I do want for my viewers and listeners to ask you a few general questions. Can you share a defining moment in your career that shaped your leadership philosophy?
Oh, most definitely. It was just 2 years after I became CEO at WD-40 Company. I went back to school. I wanted to learn the power of servant leadership, and I went back to school. One of my professors was who I would call the guru of servant leadership, Dr. Ken Blanchard. And that was a defining moment. It helped me identify the attributes of servant leadership and gave me the opportunity to start to implement those into the organization. I think before then, I wasn't as convinced as I definitely am now, is that the power of an organization lays at the feet of the people you have the privilege to lead.
Well said. And what do you see as your legacy at WD-40? And what keeps you motivated in this next phase of your life?
Well, my legacy was really in building an enduring company that I was proud to hand on to others. That was my goal. And my purpose now is I help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happy, more connected world. I'm absolutely convinced that business has the biggest opportunity to make a positive difference in the world because we touch so many people every day.
Yeah.
And I often say, imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself, you learn something new, you're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. Happy people create happy families create happy communities create a happy world. And I don't think anyone would argue with me right now that a little happier world would be a good thing.
Absolutely. Great response. So, Garry, let's come to your book, Any Dumbass Can Do It. Tell me, what was the catalyst for you to write this book? And who is this book for?
So the catalyst was linked to my belief that business has the opportunity to make a difference. And, I have 25 years of scar tissue, or I often say I've just completed my 25-year apprenticeship in leadership. Now it's time to put it to work. So I wanted to share that, anybody who really understands the ingredients and the structure of building a great culture, anyone can do it. And it's very rewarding. So that's really why I put it together, was to do that. And then the book is for leaders at every level, whether you're leading a small group of people or a large organization. The basic principles are exactly the same. So it's a life journey of learning moments.
Well said. You emphasize that leadership is simple but not easy. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people try to, what I'd call, camouflage issues with confusion to make out how smart they are. And leadership is basically simple, or building cultures or building a platform or an environment for a great culture is pretty simple. It's, do you show people and do they feel like they belong? Do you show people and do they feel like they matter? Have you reduced fear by taking away the fear of failure and turning that into a rich environment of learning? Are you acting as a coach, not a manager? So are you there to help those you have the privilege to lead play their best game? And do you have a set of values that protect people and set them free? So, when you think about what I've described, those things are fairly simple. Now, it's not so easy in that time is not your friend, and you have to be consistent in executing around those things and building the behaviors and the structures around those that will help people build that type of a culture.
Well said. Your book also contains many learning moments. How did you define and develop this concept?
Yeah. So one of the biggest disabling emotions we have is fear. And the reality is that every success comes from learning.
Hmm.
And so we said, well, why are we not thinking about our journey as a learning moment? And the definition of a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome
Hmm.
of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, the brand WD-40, that blue and yellow can with the little red top,
Yeah.
it exists because of 39 learning moments.
Hmm.
Back in 1953, the company was called Rocket Chemical Company. It was a small company based in San Diego that worked in the aerospace and industry.
Hmm.
There was a challenge with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket.
Hmm.
So the chemists at the company got together and started to formulate solutions. And solution one didn't work, nor did 15 or 25 or 37 or 39.
Hmm.
But number 40 worked.
Wow.
So it stands for water displacement 40th formula. So there were 39 learning
Hmm.
moments that
Hmm.
got us to success.
Wow. This is the first time I've heard the full form of WD-40, and I've been using it for God knows how many years. Even in India, it's a very, very popular brand. But my
Mhm.
next question, Gary, is what's the biggest misconception about leadership that you want to change through this book?
Well, I think it comes back to a lot of ego-driven leaders think it's all about them. They need to have all the answers. They need to, be the smartest person in the room. They need to be, have their fingers in everything. They want to micromanage. And that's truly not what it's about. It's about, creating an environment where people can play their best game. A number of years ago, I wrote another book with Dr. Ken Blanchard, and the book is called Helping People Win at Work. And the byline is, I'm not here to mark your paper. I'm here to help you get an A.
Right.
And really, that's what it's all about, is we're here to help others play their best game. So the misconception is you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. What you need to be is the best coach in the room, and someone who creates an environment where there's psychological safety, people feel safe, and they're happy to be able to share their brilliance with you.
What a great response. Thank you. You also say, and to quote you, your tribal culture is your most enduring unifier. Help me understand this phrase that you have coined.
Yeah. So again, I go back to the principles of building great cultures, and one of them is belonging. We all have a desire to belong, and tribalism goes back to the beginning of mankind. And if you think about a tribe, it's a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. So if we have that principle in our organization, that what we are doing here is coming together to help each other grow, to protect and to provide, a life stream for each other,
Mm.
then there's this true connection of belonging. Even looking back at Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization, the first two rungs talk about being safe and being a provider, but the third one is about love or belonging. And a lot of organizations forget the power of that. Many years ago, the great philosopher Aristotle said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work.
Mm.
So if we think about our roles as doing that, having a place where you feel like you belong is very strong. It's a great anchor to an organization.
Amazing. Uh, what are your four pillars of a friction-free culture, and how can leaders implement these?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, the four pillars are care, candor, uh, care, candor, accountability, and responsibility.
Mm,
So if we think about those four pillars, what do they provide in an organization? Well, care is we love and care about our people enough, not only to reward them and applaud them for doing great work,
mm,
but we're brave enough to redirect them when we need to help them play their best game.
mm,
Candor is no lying, no faking, no hiding.
mm,
I believe in organizations, most people don't lie. I believe they fake and they hide. And the reason they do that is because of fear.
mm.
And that's where the power of the learning moment and that power of belonging and safety come in. Accountability is, are we clear what we expect from each other? What do I expect from you? What do you expect from me? And are we going to hold each other accountable? And then responsibility is also connected to accountability and ownership. And we had a pledge that we put together at the company that really describes what we call the antidote to a rampant disease that's in a lot of companies. And I call it the na
Mm,
disease, the finger pointing disease.
mm.
So we have a pledge that we put together, and we called it the Maniac Pledge. And it says, I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions.
Mm.
I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I'm responsible for telling them.
Well said. You mentioned also that values set people free. How do organizations ensure values remain at the core of decision making?
Um, what you don't do is put them in a frame and stick them up on the wall.
Correct.
They've got to be embedded in behaviors.
Mm,
And what we did at WD-40 Company as part of our coaching process, we had a commitment that at least every 90 days, we would have one-on-one discussions with the people we had the privilege to lead. And the first part of that discussion is we talk about how are they progressing towards what we had agreed their A was for the year.
mm,
But the second part of that discussion was around values. And we asked our people to share with us how they had lived our values in the last 90 days. So they would come with true examples on this is how I lived doing the right thing. This is how I lived creating a positive, lasting memory. This is how I lived making it better than it is today. So we actually, over time, the values became embedded in our behavior. And it would not be unusual, and it was actually very common for us to be, sitting in meetings or having conversations and always referencing, well, if we're going to make this decision, let's reflect on our values here. Are we aligning? Are we treating them in the hierarchical manner that we want to make sure that we're making the right decisions, not just the decision?
Well said. You also write about a situation where you say a workplace should be a place where people escape to and not escape from. What are some of
Yeah.
the key elements of this?
So yes, when we went through the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of talk about the Great Resignation, and I think people weren't resigning from organizations; they were escaping from toxic organizations. I think people should escape to organizations where they feel safe and they feel like they belong.
Hmm.
So, having the organization where you care about your people, you're being candid with them, they're clear about expectations, you're having ongoing conversations, and they have people in the organization that they can depend on
Hmm.
when times, everybody's going through their own your personal hero's journeys in one way or another.
Hmm.
So, having an organization where people actually know that they belong and that they feel safe is really important.
Well said. A few minutes back, Gary, you said that one of the four pillars of culture was candor. And you also talk about candor as the cornerstone of trust. How can leaders encourage openness and honesty?
Well, again, I think leaders need to be comfortable being vulnerable. They need to spend a lot of time in what I call the stinky locker room, which means they're not corporate royalty. They need to get their shoes dirty. They need to get alongside people and ask them simple questions like, are you okay? What's
Mm.
on your mind? Is there anything getting in your way? How can I help you? So again, it's this vulnerability, this openness. As leaders, we're not corporate royalty.
Correct.
We are there to serve our people. So, exercise servant leadership as much as you can within the organization. And
Mm.
if you think about, a great servant leader,
Mm.
there's some attributes. Great servant leaders love and involve their people. They're always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent. They're connected to their people.
Mm.
They love learning moments. They have a heart of gold, but they also have a backbone of steel.
Right.
They're champions of hope. They know micromanagement is not scalable. They do what they say they're going to do, and they treasure the gift of feedback.
Well said. Well said. And how can a leader create a culture where people feel safe to take risks and fail without fear of retribution?
It really goes back to the essence of the learning moment. So
Mm.
describe, that we want to share not only positive and negative, and when there's a negative learning moment, we take that as a learning opportunity. People are afraid to share because of consequences.
Mm.
Now, that doesn't mean that this organization is a soft organization. I mean, you have principles and values that will keep you aligned. But again, you've got to create this psychological safety, as Amy Edmondson writes about it in a lot of her work. It's about having that openness and that ear to be able to hear people.
Mm. Your book talks about the messy middle. How should
Mm.
leaders navigate uncertainty and change effectively?
I think transparency is very important. Where we all have the messy middle, and I think it's, I love one of Brene Brown's quotes. She said, "In the absence of facts and data, people make up stories, and those stories become their truth." So when you're in that messy middle, communicate, transparency, make people aware of the issues and the situations, and then that will then give them that confidence that you need to have.
Mm, amazing. I have time for two more questions. Um, Garry, many leaders deal with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Have you ever faced it? And if yes, how did you overcome it?
I'm sure we've all had some degree of imposter syndrome sometimes.
Yeah.
I think it would be naive of us to say we hadn't.
Mm.
But I think it's a matter of centering yourself, understanding, have you gathered the facts? Have you got good information? And then at the end of the day, you've just got to go try it. And if you're in an organization where there is a low level of fear, I think you have a lower level of imposter syndrome because you know that there are people there to help you. The other way is, depend on others. I've been fortunate enough to have great coaches in my life,
Yeah.
great mentors that I've been able to call upon to help me better understand a situation or to just purely encourage me.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And my last question to you, Garry, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. What are the lessons you want your readers to take away from your book?
That we have a purpose in life,
Mm.
that if we truly use it to help those around us be better,
Mm.
that's truly a fulfilling life.
Mm.
Life is a gift. We should not send it back unwrapped.
Absolutely. Well said. And on that note, and your powerful lesson, we have a purpose in life, the life worth living. Give your best as you can. Thank you, Garry, for speaking to me about your own journey. I think WD-40 is quite a legendary, iconic brand, not just from the time you created it in the US, but all over the world. Thank you for speaking to me about your book. Any dumbass can do it. It's distillation of several decades of your work, which has come down in such simple, easy to understand language. We spoke about simple but not easy. We spoke about learning moments. We spoke about the four pillars of culture. Then you spoke at some length. You also spoke to me about candor as the cornerstone and the messy middle. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.